O give thanks unto the Lord, for he is good, for his mercy endureth forever. Let the redeemed of the Lord say so, whom he hath redeemed from the hand of the enemy. For he satisfieth the longing soul, and filleth the hungry soul with goodness. Let us pray. Dear God, we thank you for the privilege to come before you today. We thank you for just this time you've allowed for us to spend. We thank you for keeping us thus far through this pandemic and through all that's happening in the world. And we just pray that you would be the focus of this time period. We ask that your spirit would rest upon this broadcast and upon this service and upon the physical locations of each and every one of us who are watching and participating in this service, no matter when we watch it. We just pray that you would meet us here, move within us, speak through us, and use us through for your glory, that you would give us the strength to make it to whatever it is you've called us to do and to be better representatives of you. We just pray that you would get the glory out of all we do today and that we would leave this service as better people. These things we ask in your son, Jesus' name, amen. So, good morning, everybody, and welcome to our service. This is my first, well, actually, I was here a few weeks ago for Resurrection Sunday, but as a lot of you know, I have been on parental leave for the last, few months, honestly, celebrating the birth of baby boy Sawyer. And if you need a reminder of how Sawyer looks, here is how he looked when he was first born, just a few hours old. And I have some more recent pictures of him, but yes, he still has that same very large head. Because, yeah, I'm the only one that can call him a big head because he has my large head. But, yeah. So since he was born on February 28th, I have been on some sort of leave to some extent, and thankfully we've had, up to this point, 7 preachers who I consider friends covering for me. And we are about to have our final minister of my parental leave period preaching in just a few minutes. But before we get to that, I just want to make sure that you all know how thankful I am that you're still here, that you're still worshiping with us during this pandemic. One of the things about the pandemic is that a lot of churches all over the world have started streaming and running their ministries online to some extent, which means you really could literally be worshiping with just about any church around the world right now. But we're thankful that you're here with us. And we also pray that if you have gotten something out of these services, we pray that you would share us on your timeline. And for those who don't really like using Facebook or have friends who are not on Facebook who you would like to see what we do, we do also keep our sermons on our YouTube channel. They don't go out there live, but they do come up shortly behind service. So you can always find us on our YouTube channel too, if you need to. And if you'd like to share with people who are not on Facebook. If you don't feel led to share, it's all right. We love you anyway. We're glad that you're here. But we do hope that you would at least consider liking and or subscribing to what we do. That way you will know when our services are coming up and see our announcements and things like that. So we're thankful that you're here with us. And I'm glad to be here for this service, even if it is a reminder that my parental leave is coming to an end, because it also means that my baby boy is getting older. He just turned 2 months last week. So it seems like it was just yesterday that we were in that hospital room. But before we move on to the preacher, there are a few things I want to say. First is it is Mother's Day. And because it's Mother's Day, we have a bit of a tribute. Well, first, happy Mother's Day from Eurowell Christian Ministries. We know that we are a ministry that has a lot of women in it and a lot of mothers. So we want to make sure you know that we salute you. And we also salute those who've acted in more or less a motherly type of role, like the aunties. Aunties are very important too. So whether you are a biological mother, whether you are more or less a surrogate mother, whether you are an auntie, or even like a big cousin, this is a time that we salute you. So thank you for your contributions. Thank you for the love that you all have shared. And we know that this can also be a bit of a bittersweet time for some of us. Some of us, our mothers are no longer here. And so I'm just going to pray pretty quickly about that. people who might have complicated feelings around Mother's Day. We know that this, for instance, is the first Mother's Day since my wife's grandmother died. So there are a lot of people who may be in the same situation who are grieving the loss of loved ones. So we'll pray for them right now, and then I'm going to continue this. But let us pray. Dear God, we just thank you for the contribution of mothers, for the love that you've allowed mothers to share with us, for the lessons that we have learned from them. And we pray that you would just allow them to see that they are loved and they are appreciated and that their labor is not in vain. And we also pray for all of those who served in the role of mother, whether they be biological mothers, adoptive mothers, surrogate mothers, aunties, mothers of the community, whatever their role is, just help them to know that they are loved and supported. But we also pray for those who are feeling a loss of their mother, those who are grieving their mothers, those who have complex relationships with their mothers who are still here. We know that you are a healer. We know that you walk with us. We know that we are never alone because you are there with us. And you've felt everything we feel. You've seen everything we see. You know everything we know. So we just pray that you would help those in that situation know that they are not alone and that you understand and that their feelings are valid at this time. But we just thank you still that you are with us, and we pray that you will continue to show yourself. And we thank you for showing yourself in our lives through the women who've served as mothers to us. These things we ask in your son, in Jesus' name, amen. So now getting back to my mother tribute, obviously I couldn't let this Mother's Day go without speaking about a few mothers that are pretty close to me. The first is Deaconess Rhonda Burroughs Griffin. That is First Lady Tia's mother. You can see the resemblance. You see little baby Sawyer in the picture. It's wearing the same outfit he was wearing in the photo I showed earlier. So right now she is enjoying a girls' trip with a few of her friends, much needed girls' trip. We know this has been a tough year for her, so we want to thank God for her and salute her because this is her first Mother's Day as a grandmother, affectionately known as Nana to Sawyer. So happy Mother's Day, Nana. Next, my mother, Deaconess Julia Clayton. If you've been watching our services for the past few weeks, you've seen how she has stepped up and introduced most of the services, make sure things were flowing, prayed, and it's great to be able to count on her and see how God has been using her in this role. Once she just steps up and said, you know what, you're going on break, let me do something to help keep the church afloat. So I'm thankful for her. And she is also celebrating her first Mother's Day as a grandmother. There's baby boy Sawyer a few days after he came home from the hospital. And if you look over her shoulder, you see that there is like a gray chalkboard type sign that says Baby Clayton. You'll remember on our social media, we put down that sign that said Baby Clayton coming March 2022. And you know that Sawyer had a sense of humor because he came just a few hours shy of March 1st. So just showing he's don't try to predict what I do. And he has been that kind of baby ever since. But either way, thank you, Deaconess Julia Clayton, for all that you've done. And we salute you. And of course, you all know that I couldn't let this go without also saluting First Lady Tia Burroughs Clayton. There's a picture of Sawyer at his 9-day-old shoot that he had. He was big even then. But happy first Mother's Day, Tia. I know this has been an adventure, and I'm glad you're the person that God has chosen to go on this adventure called life with me. And I look forward to raising our baby boy together. So happy Mother's Day, Tia. And before we introduce the preacher, I just had one more thing that I wanted to discuss. And that is, if you've been watching the news, you know that there was a bit of a leak, which is kind of unprecedented, but a leak from the Supreme Court that pretty much makes it clear that there's at least a strong possibility, a strong likelihood that Roe versus Wade is about to be overturned. And for those who don't understand that, Roe versus Wade is the court case that makes abortion legal throughout this whole country. And so I know that there are some people who are probably watching who are pro-life, and think it's a good thing. But there are a lot of people who I know personally, and I know I'm included in this, who don't see this as a good thing and see it as really an opportunity for those on the right politically to try to legislate and control women's bodies. And, so we see that as problematic. And if you've been watching these services for a while, you know that, where I tend to lean politically on a lot of things. You know where First Lady Tia leans politically on a lot of things. But I'm not going to go into as much detail about that. I do have a small presentation, though, that I'd like to give that I think some of you will appreciate. And that is things our society would do that would actually decrease abortions, instead of trying to do it by legislation. Because as anybody who studied history would know, all that was happening when abortions were not legal in this country was that people were doing them in back alleys. And so you'd have a lot of women who were dying because of, obviously, back alley abortions that, by not being performed in hospitals or medical centers, were leaving them open to infections and things like that. So making it illegal is not going to stop it from happening. But here are some things that could slow it down. And so for this first slide, I'm going to talk about things that men can do, because it seems like men are the ones that are trying very hard to legislate women's bodies in this case. All of our legislatures are still mostly male in this country. Our Supreme Court is still mostly male right now, too. So, things that men can do. 1, stop using women for sex. And what I mean is that there's this thing where it's like boys will be boys, and it's almost like a bit of a rite of passage for a man to sleep with as many women as possible. But you kind of ignore the fact that, when you're sleeping with women, babies can happen. So let's normalize not having sex outside of commitments. That's one way that we can slow this down. Number 2, of course, don't be a rapist. And why is that? Well, one of the major reasons that abortions tend to happen in this country, obviously, is because of rape. So if men would just learn to control themselves around women, that would be one less abortion that would need to happen. And I'll also add, as a corollary to this, call out your creepy friends. We all know who the creepy friend is. And yeah, we need to not enable his behavior. Lastly, use birth control. If you're not ready to be a father, condoms work. And if you're somebody who doesn't like the whole feel of a condom, or feels like it makes things too clinical, too predictable, vasectomies work too, and they're reversible. So use birth control. And now, things that we all can do. 1, we can improve access to and knowledge of contraception. We know there are some parts of this country that still like to talk about abstinence-only education, but those states historically were also the ones that had the highest abortion rates. So if people know how not to get pregnant, then, of course, that means that pregnancy rates, or rates of unwanted pregnancies, go down, which means potentially abortions would decrease. Number 2, we could also push for a livable wage, because finances are often a reason that people will choose not to go through for pregnancy. Fear of how they can manage to take care of yet another mouth in their household. And this isn't even just limited to single women, the way our society tries to limit it. Oftentimes it's married couples who go through that horrible decision-making process as well. It's well, if we bring another life into this world, can we actually afford to take care of it? Now, next, we could also push for universal paid parental leave, because some people are in situations where, I can say in the state where we live in Pennsylvania, while you are guaranteed 6 weeks of parental leave, if you're a mother who's just given birth, it's not paid. So if you can't afford to go 6 weeks with no income, that might be something that would lead you to decide not to go forward with the pregnancy. And even for me, I work in New Jersey, and for that reason, I am eligible for paid parental leave there for a certain amount of time. But even that system leaves a lot to be desired. It's not really all that user-friendly or straightforward. So we should just make it more or less a universal thing. And I know that was part of the infrastructure package that did not pass last year, but it's something that's needed in our society desperately. And lastly, push for quality health care for all because, again, one, there are a lot of things that happen during pregnancy that, of course, we need good medical care for, but also the fact that without good healthcare insurance, pregnancy can be incredibly expensive and frightening and daunting to me. Even with the insurance I had, we've had some kind of frightening bills come through. Thankfully, we had insurance we could always resubmit. But imagine that person who doesn't have enough money to get insurance or works at a job that pays for the least, I guess, least protective insurance they can get, like just so they can check a box and say, our employees have insurance. You know, that's something that shouldn't happen. Healthcare should be something that we all can get. And quality healthcare itself would also lower the amount of abortions that happen. But of course, we know that this is not really about decreasing abortions as much as it is about exerting control. So you all know where I stand on that, but we can just keep that in prayer. And without further ado, I am going to introduce our speaker for today's service. And that is, just give me a second. I have to pull up his bio. So, the Reverend Kyle Brooks, Ph.D., a native of Detroit, Michigan, is the Assistant Professor of Homiletics, Worship, and Black Church and African Diaspora Studies at Methodist Theological School in Ohio. He received his BA, MA, and MDiv degrees from Yale University and the Yale Divinity School. He completed his PhD in religion at Vanderbilt University. Beyond his scholarly work, he expresses his creativity as a poet and multi-instrumentalist. As an ordained minister and liturgist, he works to curate spaces and rituals for sacred memory and worship. So I'll just add in that he is a friend of mine, somebody that I met during my time at Yale, and that, you know, if you followed these services or followed our ministry for a bit, you know that Yale wasn't one of the, I guess, most positive points in my life. Like, it was difficult. But even in that difficult season of my life, there were people that I met that made the road a lot easier to travel. And Reverend Brooks was one of those people. We found ourselves in a lot of the same circles, whether that meant the gospel choir or the church or even some plays that we did behind the scenes. But yeah, he just was a solid kind of brother that you knew was going to make a difference in the world someday. And I'm thankful that he was willing to come here and share the gift that God has given him. So today I'm going to introduce to some and present to others the Reverend Kyle Brooks, Ph.D.
Thank you, Reverend Spencer, for that introduction, and greetings to you all at Your Will Ministries. It is a pleasure to join with you all today, and it is my hope that this message would leave something with you, offer you some encouragement, some hope, and something to help carry you through this week. So, before I begin, let us pray. God, we give thanks for these moments in which we can gather, in which we can celebrate you and your work and presence in our lives. God, I pray that the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart would be acceptable in your sight, O God, my strength and my Redeemer. Amen. Today, my scripture text is from the book of First John in the New Testament, the 4th chapter, verses 7 through 9 and verses 16 through 21. And it reads as follows: Beloved, let us love one another, because love is from God. Everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, for God is love. God's love was revealed among us in this way: God sent his only son into the world so that we might live through him. So we have known and believed the love that God has for us. God is love, and those who abide in love abide in God, and God abides in them. Love has been perfected among us in this, that we may have boldness on the day of judgment, because as he is, so are we in this world. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear. For fear has to do with punishment, and whoever fears has not reached perfection in love. We love because God first loved us. Those who say, I love God and hate their brothers or sisters are liars, for those who do not love a brother or sister whom they have seen cannot love God whom they have not seen. The commandment we have from him is this: those who love God must love their brothers and sisters also. I want to share with you today from this topic, this idea. Loving you is complicated. Mother's Day is one of those times of the year where we are forced to reckon with the fact that love is complicated. People often have complex relationships to their mothers, to the people who mothered them, to the people who birthed and raised them. Sometimes those relationships have grown stronger over time. Other times they have disintegrated, or perhaps they never existed well at all. It's enough to make you wonder sometimes, does anybody still believe in love? The kind of unconditional, or I'd prefer under all conditions kind of love, the kind that people expect a mother to have for a child. I will say this, that the easiest way to learn about love is to watch people practice. And two of the best lovers I ever saw were my grandparents. Isaac King Jr. and Margaret Jewel Gordy spent over 6 decades of their lives together. And they spent 59 years, 5 months, and 4 days of that time married to each other. And when they got married on October 3rd, 1953, he was 23 and she was 19. They were young and in love. Now, I was 6 years old when I went to live with my grandparents. About this time, they were no longer newlyweds. They had had 3 children who were now adults, and they had been married for 36 years. Now, I've never been married, but I hear that the years make a difference. 36 is no longer newlywed, it's mature status. It meant that they had spent more of their lives being married than being single. It meant that they had seen the good, the bad, and the ugly in one another. It meant they knew each other's morning breath and each other's evening snoring. It meant that they were not new to this, they were true to this. And true love takes work. And Isaac and Margaret worked at that thing every single day, not because they had to, but because they chose to. They knew that everyone who says, I do, doesn't always keep doing. So they kept choosing each other every single day until my grandmother died. And before my grandmother died, my grandfather and I sat down and talked. And it was one of the most open conversations, most honest conversations I think we've ever had in my life. And I asked him, Papa, because that's what I called him. I said, you and grandma have been married for so long. How did you know she was the one? And he looked at me, slowly smiled, and he said, well, the one is the one that you choose. He said, most folks, when they're young and in love, they don't look this far down the road. They don't think about what happens when your love forgets your name. They don't think about when your body starts to betray you, or those days when your passion is fading and your attention is wandering, because falling in love is easy. So is climbing out of it. The hard part is choosing it over and over again. The fourth chapter of First John gets right to the point. Beloved, let us love one another. It's a simple statement, but it's a hard job. Because if loving people is so easy, why is the writer telling church folk they need to do it? If love is so obvious, why do we have to be reminded? Well, keep in mind that the author is not writing to us. The author is responding to a particular situation. I try to imagine what's happening after Jesus' ministry on earth. The early Christian community is growing, it's expanding. Every church community has its traditions, its rituals, its boundaries. But I guarantee you that the longer a community exists, the harder it is to stay connected to your roots. And if you don't guard and preserve your traditions, you might look up one day and realize you've become disconnected. The Christian church is a community built on the gospel, and the gospel is a tradition that developed from the life of Jesus the Christ. And what the church believes about Jesus impacts the way that we look and the way that we act. But here's the issue: everybody claiming Jesus ain't really following him. I heard a lot of folks say that they marched with Martin Luther King Jr. Most of them couldn't tell you what he believed in. It's easy to remember icons and to forget what they stood for. There were many people claiming Jesus Christ, and I believe the author of First John knows this, but their practices didn't reflect the tradition. See, the early church wasn't just one congregation. They were different groups, different movements. There were folks who believed Jesus was a spiritual being, but not a human being. There were folks who disagreed about the value and the meaning of his death. Lots of different perspectives developed about the life of Jesus, and First John is urging Christian readers to stick with what they heard from the beginning. If the Christian church is built on what it heard from the beginning, then we should ask what the founder said. It was Jesus who proclaimed the greatest commandment: love God with your entire being and love your neighbor as yourself. This is the heart of the gospel. And a church that doesn't love is a church with a heart problem. It's a community suffering cardiac arrest. That means its heartbeat is out of rhythm. When human beings suffer cardiac arrest, medical personnel will use a defibrillator, an electric machine, to reset the heart's rhythm. The machine analyzes the heartbeat to determine what's wrong, and then it delivers an electric current to the heart. The shock disrupts the chaotic rhythm and allows it to return to normal. First John chapter 4 is the defibrillator for a church whose heart is out of rhythm. The church is meant to live by the pulse of the gospel, and the author is trying to make sure that people remember what that pulse is. Love is the pulse of the Christian community. It is the rhythm that governs our thoughts, our words, and our deeds. And just like our own heartbeats, it requires consistency. The human heart is about the size of my fist. That heart keeps blood circulating through the entire body. Imagine that your heart is beating once every second. That's 60 times a minute. That's 3,600 times an hour. That's 86,400 times a day. And that's 31,536,000 times a year. And if your heart ever decides to take a break, that's it. You can't afford a sporadic heartbeat, but neither can the church. First John chapter 4 is a blueprint for how we keep the church alive. It's a reminder of what love is and what it looks like. It reminds us that love is not recreational, it is required. It is the rule, not the exception. It is the prerequisite to being people of the gospel. And there are standard operating procedures for every community, and love is the standard for Christian community. See, love is a simple word with a difficult execution. Love is complicated. It's easy enough to talk about, but it's much harder to live it out with consistency and clarity. And if we want to be the church, we have to learn to live with the complexity of love. If we want to be the church, we have to love like Jesus loved. If we want to be the church, we have to know what love is and what love demands. So, what does love mean for the Christian believer? Well, I could say that love is an obligation, not an option. When I say love is an obligation, I mean it's a duty, it's a commitment. That doesn't mean we can't do something else. It does mean that we cannot be who we claim to be without being what that claim demands. I'm saying that we don't get the luxury of calling ourselves Christians if we will not do what Christians do. And what are we obligated to do? The text tells us, love one another. Why? Because love is from God. Because people who love are born of God and know God. And if God is love and I don't love, how can I claim to know God? It's simple. I can't. The text shows us that God's love is revealed through God's Son. Jesus enters the world in human form to show us how to live. He is the representation and the reflection of God's love on earth. And this is how we see God, through a living example. If Jesus is the example of God's love, then we have to follow the example. It's pretty straightforward. But the bigger issue is this: we really don't want to do it. See, a lot of folks want to be like Jesus, but most folk don't want to do what that requires. See, if the life of Jesus is what love looks like in practice, do we really want that? Where did Jesus go? And what did Jesus do? Who did he hang with? What kinds of risks did he take? Do we really want to be like Jesus, or do we just want to be on his team? I'm not always so sure. In fact, I'm pretty convinced that the idea of Jesus is far more attractive than the reality of his life. See, it's easy to celebrate the life of Jesus when we don't have to live it. Jesus went to some rough places. Jesus did hard things. Jesus spent time with the poor, the sick, the suffering, the marginalized, the social outcasts, the ratchet folk, the unruly folk, the uneducated folk, the folk who needed real love more than they need regular criticism. Jesus did not come to pat people on the head. He came to change their entire lives. Jesus was not preaching to the choir. Jesus came to set captives free. God sends Jesus to live with us among humanity. Jesus is proof that love needs to be practiced in community. Because love is for bringing us together, not isolating us. And this could also be what makes it so hard. We have to love up close and personal. We have to be close enough to embrace and to experience all the stuff we despise. Getting up close means I am acquainted with the good, the bad, and the ugly of my life and yours. Now, there's some stuff about me you may not want to know. There's some skeletons in my closet that I don't want to escape. And love doesn't mean excusing what I've done wrong. Love doesn't mean avoiding the consequences of our actions. It means confronting who we are and asking, how do we get better? How do we do better? If I love you, I can't let you stay stuck. The intellectual and author James Baldwin put it this way: if I love you, I have to make you conscious of the things you don't see. Some of y'all know what it is to make the people you love conscious of the things they don't see. Showing them some of their habits, their tendencies, showing them the things that make life challenging and difficult. You know what it means to have to say hard truths to people you love. But you say those truths because you love them. Because you know you want what is best for them, what is good for them. And so you don't let them stay stuck in bad habits and terrible practices. Love means I'm obligated to tell you the truth. Means you are obligated to show me where I went wrong. It means we are obligated to pull each other up out of our mess. See, I want to be around people who love me too much to let me make a fool of myself. I know I'm talking to somebody in here who had to tell somebody you love, don't have me out here looking crazy. See, it's our Christian obligation to make sure that how we live and move reflects the God we say we love. But what else can we say about love? Love is a response, not a reaction. It's responsive, not reactionary. We know this because of the text. We love God because God first loved us. This indicates a reason, not a mere reaction. And God's love is the motivation for our love. See, I've learned over time, we don't choose our reactions, we choose our responses. See, reaction is an unconscious activity. Response is an intentional action. There's a difference between putting your hand on a hot stove and your hand jerking back in reaction versus responding to the burn by treating your hand. Reactions and responses are different things with different practices and intentions. I think part of the problem is that the church has become more reactive than responsive. We can be so busy reacting, we forget to respond to genuine needs. See, we react to all the things we think are wrong, but we don't respond to where people are in their journey. We react because that's just the way we are. But honestly, I think that's really laziness. I think we lean on reaction because it doesn't require reflection. If we do just what we feel, we don't have to feel what we're doing. And often we're afraid of what happens when we really have to respond to people. I believe we struggle with the fear of and resistance to love because the fear and resistance to love is the fear of and resistance to light and mirrors. We don't want to see things clearly. We don't want to be exposed. We don't want to have to reflect. And too often, I find that Christians and Christianity are defined by what we don't do instead of what we must do. My grandfather often told me that the way you do anything is the way you will do everything. So the question for me is, how do Christians love? If you had to examine your practices of love and care and concern for yourself and for your neighbors, for your community, what would it look like? I often ask myself, if love is what God is, then love ain't what God ain't. So what do we claim to do in the name of love? What kinds of choices have we made in the name of love? What kinds of damage have we done in the name of love? Because in the end of the day, love doesn't make us stupid or mean. Love pushes us to get beyond ourselves and to think of others. I am convinced that our present day is suffering from a deficit of love. People who are so fixated on being right and appearing correct that they have not thought of where they have failed to love and care for their neighbor. People who try to organize and structure this world in oppressive ways because they believe if they can just make right laws, they are practicing right relationship. Well, I suggest to you that if everything we do reflects a belief in a God we can't see, but a failure to love the people we can, then we've gotten it all wrong. My friends, the message is simple. Love is the mandate, the requirement of the people of God. We cannot call ourselves the Christian church if we are unwilling to practice the love that Jesus practiced for us. The kind of love that is willing to face death and destruction if it means restoration and resurrection. My friends, it's never too late to resurrect our love. Never too late to resurrect the relationships that have been lost. Never too late to resurrect our practices of care and compassion for each other. Never too late to look at one another and see the image of God and know we should not be reacting just to what we see, but responding to what we deeply feel. The recognition that God's image is imprinted on all of us. Yeah, loving is complicated, but it's not impossible. My prayer is that every day be another opportunity to practice that love. My friends, as I come to a close today, I invite you to reflect on what love has looked like in your own life. Has love been absent? Have you ever found yourself questioning the love of God because the people who claim to represent God show you anything but care and compassion? I'll be the first to tell you that church folk are not perfect folk. That Christians are not people who have gotten everything right. If there is anything we get right, I hope it is this. And we recognize how imperfect we are, how much we struggle to get past our human failings, our human flaws. But in the midst of that, God has loved us, not in spite of who we are, but because we are created by God. And my prayer today, my invitation to you is that if you want to be a part of community that loves one another, that cares for each other, that works to do what Christians ought to do, love God and love each other, then right now is an opportunity. And I invite you to pray this prayer along with me. God, we recognize where we have failed to love you and to love one another. We recognize that through Jesus, you have invited us into the possibility of loving relationship. God, I pray right now that you restore our hearts, heal our hurts, open our minds and our hearts to the possibility of growing and expanding beyond our failures, beyond our pain, and learning to see one another as you have seen us, as beautiful, loved, and blessed. God, inhabit our hearts and our minds and teach us daily how to love like Jesus loved, how to be Christians who are known by our love, so that our testimony never has to be with words, but can always be with our actions. In Christ's name I pray. Amen.
Right. Thank you for that powerful word, Reverend Kyle. We appreciate that a lot. It's given us a lot to think about, and especially starting with the example of your grandparents. I mean, I know my grandparents were together for over 50 years as well, and it's something that doesn't happen as frequently these days. So, it sounds like you've had a great foundation set before you for what love looks like, plus also a reminder to us that love indeed is complicated, but yet that is what we are commanded to do as the people of God. So, thank you for that reminder. And this is just a reminder for all of you who participated in this service who are watching that if you would like to donate to Reverend Kyle's love offering, all you have to do is click on the donation link, which will be in the description of this message. And when you get to the page, it gives you an option to choose different funds. You can choose the guest preacher fund. And as long as you choose that and make your offering by the 14th of May, that will be added into his love offering. So we thank you for, again, letting God use you. And we thank all of you for watching and participating. I mean, I know as you all figured out, this isn't a live service because one of the things that First Lady Tia definitely really wanted was the opportunity for me not to be trying to do a lot of things the morning of Mother's Day as she celebrates her first Mother's Day. So that's one of the best gifts I can give her. But we're thankful that you all were still here with us for this service. And before I turn it back over to Pastor, well, I knew him as Pastor Brooks at a time, Black Church at Yale, way back when. It's hard to believe how long ago that was, but it was
Yeah.
indeed quite a long time ago. But before I turn it back over to Reverend Brooks, I know that I've talked about Sawyer, and I said that I would give another picture of Sawyer for some of you who haven't seen him recently. So this is how Sawyer looks right now. This picture was taken last Friday, so a little over a week ago when he turned 2 months old. And of course, as you can see, there was, he's wearing Yale gear because there was an event that happened at Yale this past weekend. And of course, I wasn't able to get to, but Reverend Brooks was able to get there. And so I felt that I wouldn't be there in person, but I'd be there in spirit by letting my little baby son wear Yale gear. This is not putting any pressure on him to go to Yale, though I would definitely be very happy if he decided to. And with that, I'm going to turn things back over to Reverend Brooks to give us our benediction.
All right. May the grace of God and the sweet communion of the Holy Spirit rest, rule, and abide with us now and forevermore. And may the God who is love teach us daily how to love one another with our whole hearts, with our full minds, and with wide open arms. Amen and amen.
Amen. So, God willing, we'll see all of you next week for a normal service.